Welcome to episode 114 of the Sports Geek podcast. This week I chat Facebook ads with Dennis Yu, looking at the successful case study of the Golden State Warriors.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host, who often falls down the rabbit hole of Facebook ad campaign stats, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to the Sports Geek podcast, and I do often fall down the rabbit hole of Facebook ad campaign stats, and I do it actually on this episode with Dennis Yu from Blitzmetrics, where we talk about some of the work that he's done both on Facebook and on Google and how they've worked together for some success off the court with the Golden State Warriors. I've spoken to Kenny Lauer previously on the podcast, and I talked to Dennis about what the Golden State Warriors are doing to maximize revenue from their digital channels, especially Facebook, and understanding how they can better target and better serve the right ads at the right time to Golden State Warriors fans. Thank you very much for listening to the Sports Geek podcast. You may be doing so on iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud, or you might be doing it on my favourite podcast app, Pocket Casts. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. You can contact me on most social media platforms at Sean Callanan on Twitter, Sean Callanan on LinkedIn, and the same on Snapchat, or you can use the old-fashioned method and send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Will find me. Really looking forward to this chat. I hope you are too. Dennis and I talk about the processes that he uses at Blitzmetrics, some of the digital plumbing that's required if you are going to tackle Facebook ads and Google ads, to understand what you're getting in return, return on advertising spend, or ROAS, as Dennis refers to it in the interview. We do dive into the weeds a little bit, but really it's a lot about the process and the setup that you need to do if you're going to run these types of campaigns. I was lucky enough to meet Dennis in San Francisco last year at SEAT, and talk a little bit about what he's doing with the Golden State Warriors and doing it with other teams. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it. Dennis Yu from Blitzmetrics. Very happy to welcome a good friend of mine, Dennis Yu, CTO from Blitzmetrics, to the Sports Geek podcast. Welcome, Dennis.
Hey, Sean, good to see you.
You did just joke just before there when I asked you about your title. You said, no, I'm just tech support at Blitzmetrics. You pretty much do it. You pretty much cover everything. You can't just be pigeonholed with one title.
Well, when you're in a technology software / marketing company, all kinds of stuff breaks. And when you're playing with Facebook and their APIs and even Google stuff breaks, all that stuff falls onto me because I manage a team of engineers, and if they can't figure it out, then it's got to come to me. So I like to joke that, I'm the bottle washer, janitor, door opener, Amazon orderer, CTO. I like CTO because that says that we have a process, technical driven way to solve marketing challenges instead of some kind of fluffy, other C-level title.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about your digital marketing background. How did you come to be here, and what got you started?
I used to run analytics at Yahoo, what used to be a proud search engine. I used to wear purple, and prior to that, I built AA.com for American Airlines, and that was 20 years ago. So I'm showing my age back in the realm of dial-up before there was, high-speed internet and people were coming on Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL, even back then.
All right, well, I'm going to pause you there, Dennis. I'm going to get James, my editor, to put in a sound, a bit of nostalgia here for it. The sound of that dial-up modem. I'm sure there will be other people listening that will remember the sound of the dial-up modem very, very well. So I come from that era as well, and so do a lot of my listeners. So we've had that now, and let you continue.
I'm just a math guy. I used to compete in math contests 30 years ago. So my educational background is math and finance. And coming into the business world, I wanted to quantify everything. And I thought, how do we best measure what things should cost and how to make money? And the world of internet marketing was rife in terms of the ability to drive traffic, but not really knowing how to measure it. So sports was a perfect place to do that. The Warriors have been a fantastic place where we know we're driving tons of traffic, but now it's a matter of how do you quantify that and tie $1 of advertising revenue or 1,000 visitors to the app or to the blog, and seeing does that result eventually in ticket sales and merchandise. And that's the kind of thing that we do at a number of other teams. We do it for schools, and since then, in the last 3 years, we've turned our platform into an educational vehicle for students to be able to get education while they're working, executing package processes, which we'll talk about in a little bit, for various sports teams. It's a great way for these kids, while they're still in school, to get great experience. And at the same time, the teams are able to get ROI because they know a particular process is being followed.
So, yeah, I really want to dive in on that because, we see a lot where teams are, like the Warriors and like teams around the world, they're building up these big audiences on multiple platforms, but Facebook is the one where they're getting the most traction of amount of likes. But then, as you were saying before, the API changes and Facebook pulls the levers a little bit on what gets seen, what doesn't get seen, and the teams are trying to figure out how do they monetize these fan bases? How do they make money from this traffic? How do they sell more tickets? And Facebook has made a concerted effort over the past 4 or 5 years to push all of that sales traffic into the advertising platform in so much that they're detecting when it's a sales post, and they're pretty much forcing page owners, not just sports ones, to say that's a spend post. You should be putting some spend behind it. And that's been a process for not only normal businesses to learn, but also the sports teams to understand that. I think that switch of when I'm looking for a paid outcome, I'm going to put some advertising behind it. I think that's one that's now, it's pretty much now getting accepted in the sports world. It definitely was in San Francisco last year at SEAT. How have you seen sports teams coming to grips with that? We're on a free platform. Why do we need to now pay for it? Which was a conversation for a couple of years there.
I think the conversation's turning into, okay, we know that you can monetize it, but we don't have the process. We're too busy. We don't have the team in place. We'll try to do it in the off season, and they're not organized. It's possible, like the Warriors have done, to extract revenue. And I think on Facebook's blog, we actually have a featured story where we turn $1 of ad spend into $29 of measurable revenue through Ticketmaster and the shopping cart, right? And so people jump in, and a few teams have looked at this and said, like you saw, hey, this is really easy. Let's just jump in and follow these checklists. And then they realize, wait a minute, this is a lot harder because we don't have a content process. We don't have a process on what happens 2 weeks before the game, the day before the game, during the game, collecting things in a certain way so that we can boost posts in a certain way against audiences in a certain way, certain kinds of tracking that you have to enable with Ticketmaster. And I know that no other team, I don't care what league they are, no other team has the tracking that we have with Ticketmaster, because we're the ones who forced Ticketmaster to do it for us so we could do things like track primary versus secondary revenue back to came from codes, back to whether they came from Facebook or email or the blog or the app where they checked in. So without that kind of measuring, without the content, without knowing their ROI targets, then the whole system falls apart. And that's why with Facebook, we put out this 6-phase process that goes plumbing, goals, content, targeting, amplification, which is advertising, and optimization, which is ongoing iteration. That's the stuff we think all teams should follow. And that's actually channel independent. I know we talk a lot about Facebook. Facebook is Google of social networking, right? In the same way Twitter is the Bing. But we actually drive more revenue for the Warriors on Google than we do by Facebook. And we just did some research that's only a week old that shows that when we were doing boosting in the right way on Facebook, that actually drove more people to search on Google and convert. And they would convert on Warriors tickets, Golden State Warriors tickets, Ticketmaster Warriors, and different combinations of that. And we found that when we didn't push on social and we didn't do it the right way, we actually got less brand search. So there's actually an assist play. And I think a lot of folks don't see social as an assist because they don't track how, when there's engagement, where there's a highlight, where Steph Curry has 51 points and shoots from half court, amazing shots. That drives all the other, that flows through into all the other channels. Question is, how do you measure that? Because that social ultimately is word of mouth, right? It's SEO, it's PR, it's the fact that the newspapers and the other media pick up on it and friends talk about it. And at some point, it's hard to directly track that something may be 3 or 4 hops down and it results in a ticket sale a couple months later, right? But there is a process on how you measure that. That's called indirect lift, right? There's direct lift where you're tracking these links all the way through to a sale, and there's a UTM parameter or a CID if you're using Omniture, right, or a came from code. But there's an indirect way where you can test on and off and see what is the true impact of video. For example, the majority of the content that we are posting across social networks, of which Facebook's the biggest one, I think that's almost half of our audiences, is video. We are posting video in 7 different formats, right? And we're creating so much video of the little 8. We find the stuff that works the best is 8 or 9 seconds long on mobile. For some reason, that's kind of like the ideal snippet that people want to consume a play, and there's no limit. They'll consume 20, 30 of these per day. Then we have things like game summaries. We have Carousel, which is an ad. You've got Canvas, which is the new landing page basically for advertising, which is a subset of instant articles, which is a way to kind of replace the website, but you can soon embed forms. Google on mobile has something called accelerated mobile pages, which is a new format for being able to serve immediately. It's right. Google AMP is the equivalent
of
to Facebook's instant articles. Yeah, a lot of people don't even know that. They're not even testing that.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? We know that for the Warriors, 75 to 80% of our traffic is mobile. So if we care about what's going on the phone, you cannot ignore Google AMP. You cannot ignore Facebook Instant Articles, because both of those networks are basically saying, search and social, right? Google, Facebook. If you don't abide by our standards for mobile, we're not going to show up when people are searching on mobile. When they search on whatever keyword or inside the feed, you're just not going to show up because it's going to be 8 or 9 seconds to load. It's a bad user experience versus loading immediately. I'm not going to go into all the details of how that works.
So, we are in this space now where we have got Google with AMP and Facebook with Instant Articles, and they're both pushing that as the product. But it's not an and/or equation for anyone who's got a website. It's a both. You should be installing them both and effectively hedging your bets, because Facebook wants articles to load up quickly in their environment. That's Instant Articles, and Google wants the accelerated mobile project. They want pages loading fast, and they're already saying they're giving those pages a tick in the mobile experience. And like I said, 75% of traffic's moving to mobile, and it just keeps increasing. You've got to make sure that kind of that infrastructure is installed on your website. That sometimes is a problem, in the world of sports, where all the sports teams' infrastructure may be housed, back via a shared agreement via the league, which makes it very hard from a team by team basis to install that thing. I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about Facebook and Google sort of working hand in hand, because there isn't that indirect and direct sort of attribution, because it's not just hey, we'll put up an ad and that's what's going to drive all the sales. It is a multiple touch points. You've got to do things multiple times. You've got to show them a video, then show them an ad, and then make sure that they see it on with remarketing campaigns in Google and the like. It's not just a one, I'm pulling the lever on one campaign. It's a far more multifaceted approach, isn't it?
Well, when we first started with the Warriors 2 or 3 years ago, we found that because we were driving to a direct sale, right? We're trying to. It's just like when you have a multiple phase, the whole dating approach, right? There's the first date and the kiss and that whole analogy, all the way down to getting married. So we tried to get married right away. And so in order to justify the ad budget, it was straight to a conversion. They didn't care about engagement or impressions or likes or shares or any of that kind of retweets. They didn't care about that, which I understand. And our average cost per click was 25 to 30 cents. And maybe 10% of those folks will convert, 5 or 10% depending on what you're pushing and how strong the audience is and who you're targeting and that kind of thing. So our cost per conversion was in the $5 to $6 range, which is not bad to drive a ticket sale. The ROAS on that was still really good. But then we found, hey, wait a minute, if we step back one step before that and we hit all the remarketing audiences, all the people that have been to the website in the last 180 days, we then remarket onto Google and Facebook and Twitter, all of a sudden the ROI gets way better. And the bulk of the revenue that the Warriors are doing in digital actually comes from that remarketing audience. So then the owners are saying, oh, wow, these remarketing audiences are really valuable. In fact, we found that the remarketing audiences increase the value of a fan from 70 cents to $1.43 per season, right? So the fact that we get them into a remarketing audience, meaning we've collected an email, they've come to this site, they've watched a video, which on Facebook instantly creates a remarketing audience, they've installed the app, that's a custom audience. The fact that we can get them into a custom audience increases their value another 73 cents every season. So then you can calculate what the lifetime value is. You can project, are the Warriors a dynasty? How far can you project that lifetime value? But it's definitely worth it. So then we step one step back further and we say, all right, how do we build those remarketing audiences? Well, if we boost posts against certain targets and we find that for example, our cost per view on Facebook, they should pay us for saying this. Our cost per view on Facebook is 0.002 cents per view.
Yeah.
Okay. Or I'm sorry, $0.002. So it's like that, or whatever it is. It's basically
2/10 of a cent.
It's a fraction of a penny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we get these things 10 for a penny, 20 for a penny. Now imagine that. So if you get someone to watch a highlight video, and I think that we get these guys because there's a lot of autoplay and the 3-second accidental video plays on mobile, but we actually get a lot of them halfway through. Like half of them will watch 30 seconds or more. Those guys we're able to acquire for almost nothing. And even though they're not going to buy a ticket right then, the fact that we're getting that traffic for literally 1/10,000th of what it would cost to try to drive them directly to the sale at the end, the mechanics work out such that the ROI on boosting those videos to the right audiences actually exceeds trying to drive the direct sale because it flows through. And that's not even counting the secondary effects of this. When you boost a post, it actually increases the organic reach on that particular post and the ongoing organic reach on all the other posts. And it creates a PR kind of good brand effect, which is hard to really measure because there's a larger awareness overall, right? So that's where we found the highest ROI is actually at the middle of the funnel, building engagement into custom audiences. And then all the campaigns that we have that are driving sales from a custom audience to a direct ticket sale on, we're playing the Trailblazers tomorrow, get your tickets now, that kind of thing. Or, it's a Chinese New Year, get the jersey that Steph Curry was wearing, right? We have a whole system of posts that go out in accordance with how far out the games are, and if it's a marquee game versus it's just, the Clippers are in town or something like that, right? So that whole system at the bottom of the funnel is operating in its own way. But then we've got the middle of the funnel just above it generating tons and tons of remarketing audiences such that we have a sequence, right? And then that sequence includes email. So if we've collected their email, then we're going to treat them differently on social. We know also that if they are a fan versus not a fan and we have their email or they're not an email or we don't have the email, or they're a season ticket holder but they've not been to the site, or they've launched the app in the last week and they have done this or they haven't done some other thing, that's a combination of audience triggers, right, that you can then feed them some piece of content. So the Warriors are at the point now, after doing this a few years, we've got enough of these buckets of audiences where they've done this and they haven't done that we can send them the most appropriate content. So ultimately, you're treating Facebook ads as an extension of your email marketing system, where if you've got a smart segmented email marketing system where you send these different things to different people based on what they've done or not done, instead of I'm just going to blast my entire list, then now you're looking at this intelligence. Now you're looking at logic, and that's when you can extract money out of this funnel.
And that's the important thing of the content, whether it be the content that is on your website, videos that you're pushing out and promoting. Your digital team can produce this killer content And all it is doing, it's qualifying your audience. It's qualifying who's interested, how interested are they, how many pieces of your content are consuming. And so the content team can focus on producing great content that will engage, and really being the focus, knowing that in the back end of both your website and Facebook and Google, that you are collecting and building out these audiences, that the marketing and your data geeks that are sitting there slicing and dicing the data can go, okay, we know that someone consumed this video, is consumed this highlight and consumed this feature on the upcoming game. They are primed to be potentially buying a ticket, or if they're not in the region, they're primed to buy merchandise based on that content. And that's you've got to get the content funnel ready to be able to convert those likely audiences, rather than, let's target all Golden State fans on Facebook. It's much easier to be far more discerning in that once you've got all the pieces of the puzzle in place.
We find that the machine is actually smarter than we are. So the fact that we've got these tracking codes there for Google and Facebook, and then we say, okay, heavy lifting, you guys optimize, we're letting the algorithm do the heavy lifting to figure out who's going to convert. That actually beats any kind of targeting that we have put in place. Because initially we thought, here's our demographic of who's buying. They're within 50 miles of Oakland. They have this much income. They do this, they do that. And then we found, if we actually expand out to the entire world, there are quite a few international people that are buying tickets. There are quite a few people that we're engaging with them on social, on the phone, and then they turn around and they buy on desktop on Ticketmaster, because Ticketmaster has a clunky shopping cart on mobile, right, which they won't fix. And so there's a lot of these interesting kinds of behaviors. For example, we know that the best time for the Warriors to be pushing home sales is 48 hours before the event. So if we do a lot of remarketing 72 hours before, that warms up the audience so that 48 hours before they see, hey, tickets, right? That way you have kind of a stage sequence. And we can talk about all kinds of fancy stuff with Google Tag Manager and conditional firing of pixels in the data layer based on which containers you have, and all the way down to what you're doing with each of the players. Like, there's all kinds of logic which most people don't have. They're probably thinking, how do I start? The easiest way you're going to be able to prove to ownership is the fact that you can drive direct ROI by getting custom audiences in place on Facebook, driven by Google Tag Manager, please, if you can. If not, still do it. And run against a 180-day remarketing audience. That is the simplest, dumbest thing you can do. Guaranteed revenue. It will kick some butt. And then you can go into the complex stuff on Twitter remarketing and integrating emails, so that's automatic. So if they open or don't open an email, then you still hit them with social. Or if they're a single game ticket buyer, then what might you do there? Like, later you can go into all that kind of logic. But for all the people that are listening, get your custom audiences in place. We've looked at so many teams, they don't even have that. That's just money that you are wasting. Audience money right there.
Yeah, and even if you're not, even without the spend, like, there's analysis in that custom audience stuff alone. Like, just being able to load up your prospects list or your season ticket list, or having a pixel that's saying, here's your website traffic, you can at least then, just in a rudimentary sense, know who isn't a fan, start looking at the demographics of that fan base, to start seeing the opportunities. Like, once your data geeks load it and start seeing the data that's there for free, you don't have to spend money to be able to access it. Then you start seeing, I like to call them these audiences of opportunity. You're like, oh, wow, these people are like us. They visit our page. They're in our prospects list and they haven't bought a ticket. Well, why not? What can we fire to those people? So even just some of those, just in a simplistic form, there's so much value there that you just feel like, well, I want to try. I want to try some campaigns, do these audiences to see how they go.
And that's the simple thing of just getting the pixel in place so that you can learn. And so once you can get the tracking in place, then the second hurdle most people come up against is, I don't have any budget, or it costs too much, or I've got to hire an agency, or I don't know how to do it, I'm too busy. Well, we talk about this thing called the $1 a day strategy, right? So if you can just sneak in $1 a day, which should be nothing, or ideally spend $10. Can you spend $10 a day for just 10 or 20 days and use that to justify, like maybe, ask for forgiveness instead of permission, just to run the campaign and say, oh, by the way, I ran this campaign. I spent $10 and I drove $300 or $400 in ticket sales. Can I get another $1,000, please? Right? Then they can actually see the impact. But to your point, Sean, that's true. Even if they don't run ads, you could use it strictly as a market research or competitive benchmarking tool. You could say, look, all the people that have been to my website, give me the composition, what kind of phones they have, what do they drive, what else do they like, how do I compare against the other sports teams in the area? So the Warriors versus the Giants versus the 49ers versus the San Jose Sharks, right? How do I benchmark on engagement and how often people are coming back and what they're consuming and what they like? I can benchmark against the other teams in the league. I can cross my audiences to say, all right, here's my email list I've uploaded. Here's my web pixel. What percent of my email list comes to my website? What percent of my website is a fan on Facebook? What percent are in this bucket versus the other bucket, right? All that stuff is for free. And there's a process that we call the affinity grid, where you can actually break down all the different things that they like, their purchasing behavior based on point of sale data, if they're in the United States and UK and a couple other countries, right? There's all this other data that you can tie against, and it's fantastic. And like you said, you can do that part for free.
And so it is, to me, that is that first step is so important of setting up your audiences. Now, talking to you, and I've heard you use the phrase boost post a few times, and normally, I really rail against that because people will hit the boost post button. They will hit boost post to fans of our page and their friends, and pretty much just blast the money to everybody. Now, when you say boost post, what do you mean by that? Because I'm going to give you I want to understand your process a little bit.
There's a difference between trying to fix a watch with a sledgehammer versus tweezers. So with boosting a post, I think 4 years ago, I wrote a number of articles talking about how boosting posts was the crack of Facebook marketing and how you were basically a complete idiot if you wanted to boost posts because you weren't targeting, because it was just wasting your budget. The Warriors on average will get 1 million views per post that we have. So even if we boost a post and we put $10,000 against it or even $10 against it, it's not – well, the thinking back then was it's not going to move the needle, and that was true. So if I spend $50 on a post, do you remember when you for some of the big pages where
I think there's the Mark Cuban example when it first came out, and it did say, Mark Cuban, here you go, $10,000, and when it did come out per post, which. Yeah. And, I like to call it, when people are using it in that fashion, it's like Facebook ads for dummies. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to give you a bit of taste of, oh, look at that, I got more reach, I got more clicks, but it's not super targeted. So, and I've pretty much stuck with that because it's because people who see that and go, oh yeah, I boosted it, but not knowing who they boosted it to and why they boosted it, they were sort of happy with the result, the graph, really. They're happy with the graph that they saw and worried about the reach, whereas they weren't worried about the results. It has got more sophisticated since. So how do you go about using it now? How has that changed?
Okay, let me tell you the strategy for doing it properly. Now, posts go into different categories. If it's a sponsored post, like, oh, hey, here's the Kia, player of the week, or come in and get a free donut if you buy another donut, or, you've got to deal with these corporate partnership things, right? Those things typically get no reach. And there you would boost that post to the employer audiences of all your sponsors. So not people who like Verizon, but people who work at Verizon, people who work at Virgin America, who work at Samsung, who work at whatever, just to make the sponsor people happy. And that you might put $10 or $20 against, right? Depending on how big the audience is and what country you're in. Even in the United States, we find that works super well. Then you have general play updates where, the tip-off is in 4 hours, or, here's some special, we got some towel that we're giving out, some bobblehead, or, some kind of interesting little thing. We might put $20 or $30 against that, and that we're going to boost against a saved audience of loyal fans and or ticket holders and or people that are in the area that have checked in or have done something or used our app, where they're a good audience. Then you have something where you have high engagement. So here's a filter we use. If a post goes out, especially if it's video, and we get at least 1/3 of the views to turn into, or impressions to turn into video views, then we know that thing's going to get hot. And if it's pretty good, we'll put a few $100s against it, and we will target our custom audiences. And if it is something really good, such as we get north of 30% in terms of view to impression, and we get greater than 10% of likes, comments, and shares as a ratio to views. So if we get more than 10% of the people that are seeing it actually engaging with it, then we know that thing's going to go to 8, 9, 10 million impressions, right? Because you can see the curve. You can tell right away, well, you can tell within 20 or 30 minutes whether that post is going to take off. Then what we'll do is we'll put a bunch of money against it, and we'll run against everybody pretty much, which is you get 3 options when you boost a post. You have just the fans plus their friends, and then you select your targeting. We'll run against that second option because that is the ultimate in this buy one, get one free kind of thing. And some analysis that we did a couple weeks ago was for every one paid, and this is not a typo, for every one paid impression, we would generate an additional 320 organic impressions, because that's called throwing fuel on the fire. If it's hot, then you allow the algorithm to take over, because what we've noticed, and we've talked with the folks at Facebook about this multiple times, when there's engagement and the algorithm notices that people are liking, commenting, and sharing, they don't take into account whether it was paid or organic. So the fact that you're getting a secondary impression, which is called a viral impression, because Sean, you clicked on something, or Kenny or Daniel clicked on something, that's an organic impression is an initial exposure where you post and people see that. But a viral impression is when, whether it was paid or not paid, someone else sees it because of the action that someone else took. We find that our viral impressions are 90+% of our impressions. Okay, and so when we put paid against it, even though paid is only 1 or 2%, when we do it the right way, because of this buy one get 320 for free for certain posts, then it's worth putting a ton of money against it, because you're going to get way more reach on that particular post. But the only way to tell, because Facebook doesn't break that out for you very easily, the only way to tell is sometimes you have to do it on a post where you got to wait a couple hours. You want the algorithm to eat up as much organic as you're typically going to get, but not so long that you've lost the window of it being interesting and relevant, right? And then you're going to boost to that kind of audience. If you do it too early, Facebook, they don't want us to say this, but if you boost it early, what you're doing is you're cannibalizing organic reach, because the algorithm will say, well, I was going to show it organically to these other people, but you already paid for it, so I'm actually going to decrease what I would have given you. And
you want to get as much of that free love as you can, that organic love, and let it go, and then hit the button, because you're going to get, if it's good
at 2 hours. 2 hours seems to be about the right midpoint where you're not cannibalizing too much, but then you're not too late. Like, you're not going to wait till the next day; it's too late, right? Unless it's some crazy play, then people are still going to talk about it. Because by then you've missed the media window where you want to get all the other guys to pick up that story, right?
So for just to recap and sort of break in here, for the people listening who might be sitting there going, hang on, why am I spending hundreds of dollars for more people to see my video on Facebook? I haven't seen anybody buy a ticket yet. But really, this play is that start of the funnel and that engagement play. You're building out these audiences that you can then target with your next campaign, the conversion campaigns, to say, okay, those people saw that highlight, or those people saw that viral piece of content that was part organically viral and then part paid viral. You get to turn that on, and like you said, at 10 to 20 per penny, you're adding them to this group that you're making the sale with them later on. That's the investment, and to mine that's the one that's that one's the one that's a little bit tougher to pitch, because you're saying I want to build an audience inside your audience, and that takes a little bit of learning from the people that have to sign it off to know that it's not that direct line thing. You
just do it. You do a simple test. People make this thing way too complicated. The key here is video. So when you boost a video and then you go back into the ads manager or power editor, you can tick a little box that says create a custom audience from this video, meaning anyone who watches that video, because you put just a couple dollars against it, they become a custom audience, which then, right, because it's a two-phase thing. The first one is you engage them so you can get them into one of these pools. The second one is you're hitting all your custom audiences with your merchandise and ticket campaigns. And we've seen that go anywhere from an ROAS of 20 up to like 200, right? And an ROAS of 200 is we put $1 in, we get $200 back. Now, that might be during the playoffs when the ticket prices are higher and the demand is higher, and then, that kind of thing. Like the finals last year was ridiculous against the Cavs. The ROI was really good. I can't tell you what the number was, but I can tell you it was really good, okay? So no matter what, you should always start with these custom audiences. I recommend starting with a 180-day remarketing audience against the website, because that way you don't have to spend any money to build that audience, provided that audience converts and it's got a good ROAS. And you should set an ROAS target. I would say make it at least 10, but make it less than 30, because if it's less than 30, then you're giving away revenue that actually could be, you could have more incremental profit at a certain ROI, right? So once that custom audience is working, then you're going to move into building video re-engagement audiences and other kinds of custom audiences, because you've then proven that custom audiences are delivering provable ROI.
Yep. And then, like you said earlier, the other part of the plumbing is appropriately tagging all of your ads, whether they be Facebook ads, whether they be your website adverts, whether they be the email signatures in your staff, like being able to tag all of those links that are going to the destination, so you can then attribute somewhat appropriately where the sales came from. And so, I understand the frustration you would have with Ticketmaster. In ticketing agencies around the world, that getting that attribution and tracking all the way through can be difficult, but it's well worth it to keep pushing to say, I want to know what the traffic. If I'm driving traffic, I want to know what traffic succeeded. Otherwise, all this effort is for nothing.
There's a key point that you said there about tagging that I think most people are going to miss. So we talked about having plumbing as tracking audiences. Now, audiences can be tracked by an identifier because you've cookied them. And that's what we talk about with JavaScript, right, which is run by Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics, the Pixel, or the Facebook Pixel, or all these pixels. That's one kind of tagging for an audience. That includes things like email addresses and whatever, right? The other kind of tagging, and it's unfortunate that people use the same words, is URL tagging. And so that's what's in the URL string where it says UTM source or keyword equals blah, 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 right? And that's when you have the Google Analytics UTM parameters, the Omniture CIDs, the came from codes for Ticketmaster or what have you. It's not one or the other. You have to use URL tagging in conjunction with audience tagging. Those together make up the digital plumbing that we're talking about.
Yeah. And
most people have one or the other. You need both.
Yeah, and it is.
And you have to identify them.
And it's and that's part of the attribution that you need to know. So that's whoever it is your ticketing partner, you need to be asking, getting your report back on daily ticket sales or whether it's your merchandise partner and what they're doing. But then if you're just getting that raw data of sales, you need to be saying, can we get traffic? Can we get reports based on UTM tag? And then you start getting to the point where you can start tracking how these reports go, or if you're even lucky enough to put in the value amount of the actual transaction, which you can do both in Google and Facebook. Then some of that data can be pulled back into Google Analytics or the Facebook reports to actually just say, oh, you ran $200 and it resulted in $2,000 worth of merchandise sales. So that stuff's really, really important. If you can get, you are right. We should come up. Someone should say, let's change the name, because we are tagging things at both spaces. But you need to get the audiences and the pixels set up to track the audiences. But then the UTM tagging that you need to do across the board is so vital.
Yep. And the same thing with naming conventions on the campaigns. So if you're at the point where you can see generally where your marketing sources of traffic are and what's driving conversion, you've got to name all of your campaigns in a certain way for what channel, for what event, if it's sponsored or not sponsored, and what have you. So that guide that we're talking about actually shows the tagging for pixels, the tagging for URLs, and then the tagging and naming convention for all your marketing sources of traffic. That way, whenever it comes in, you can automatically categorize it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's hopefully that's enough for everyone. Where can people get some more information on this, especially the Golden State Warriors case study?
They can go to facebook.com/business/ I think is it Golden State or Warriors or something like that. Yeah, you could publish it later.
I will have the links. I'll have the links in the show notes.
Yeah, and you could also go to blitzmetrics.com/GTM, which is for Google Tag Manager, and that goes through the entire process. It's a 50-page, step-by-step, click-by-click guide. And if anyone has a problem or has a question, because you want to send it to your tech person to implement that, you could probably figure it out. But there's some technical things you have to mess around with code a little bit, right?
You've got to talk to the geeks sometime, Dennis.
Yeah. So you can just email us about that. I'm Dennis at blitzmetrics.com. We have a bunch of other engineers that do that as well. And we want everyone to get their plumbing in place, because then they're able to measure what's going on, even if they don't spend any money on ads. And then when they spend their first few dollars, just to get that budget of like $100 or just a little bit of money just to prove that it's the case, you want to hook them like a good drug dealer, right? Then you'll be able to get more money, and you'll see that you're making money not because the number one thing that people say about the Warriors is, oh, they're winning, of course they're making all this money. No, it's because we're tracking these audiences. The same thing works for the Sixers and the Phoenix Suns, and it doesn't matter whether the team's winning or losing. If anything, it's going to be easier for teams that are not doing as well in the league because they're selling primary revenue instead of secondary. We only get 14% on secondary revenue. So the ROI bar for us is even higher. It's going to be a lot easier when you're not, selling out for 130 straight games or whatever, right? If you still have primary inventory, the ROI on that's going to be higher. If you do it right, your ROI is going to be higher than what we're getting for the Warriors.
Yes. So what you can also do is, and I've actually been using these exact processes for the Sports Biz Slack community that we've got set up, where I have been retargeting people that have checked out the Sports Geek website to tell them about the Sports Biz Slack group. Dennis is part of that group. We've now got a ticketing channel, so maybe this conversation will continue in the Slack group, Dennis, on the ticketing channel, because this is fascinating stuff for people who want to get more cheeks in the seats, as I like to say, and getting more people into the stands. So people can have a conversation. If you do see one of those ads, you're seeing one of those ads because you've been to the website or you've already listened to the podcast, and we'd love to have you as part of the community. And the returns on the conversions on those campaigns, and I'm running them at $5 a day just to see how it's working, have been really good, because I'm hitting up a really warm, engaged audience that already know, I guess, what I'm delivering and what's part of what's part of Sports Geek, so they know what they're getting. If I put that ad out really wide, it's just not going to work. So it really just shows the value in knowing the audience that you want to hit up. I've just read through this Facebook guide for the Golden State Warriors and the case study. If you haven't read it, you don't have to know everything that happens there, but it'll give you a good grounding on knowing what your next steps are.
Awesome. I'd love to see everyone make lots of easy revenue and then come back and thank us for it, or tweet out that this thing worked for you. We put the guides out there. We want people to use them.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. Looking forward to catching up with you at SEAT in Las Vegas, and we'll talk soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Dennis Yu. You can follow Dennis and send him a tweet at Dennis Yu, DENNIS NNISYU. We'll find him on Twitter. And as we said earlier, you'll also find Dennis in the Sports Biz Slack group, which has just passed 250 members. So thank you if you're a listener and part of the Sports Biz Slack group. Some really great discussions happening in there. We've got a digital channel, a media channel, a newly formed ticketing channel, which I'm sure Dennis will be happy to talk about the Golden State Warriors case study and also some of that plumbing work that he had to do with Ticketmaster. It's really important to get that plumbing in place and understand where your traffic is coming from so you can get some of that attribution model sorted to be able to say, well, this budget did succeed. So there's a few channels in there, a lot of people discussing different topics. As a Sports Geek listener and people who are working in sports biz, you're more than welcome. Simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack to get an invite. And after I receive that invite, I will send you an invite to the Slack group, and love to have you join the conversation and contribute to the community that is developing in that Slack community. So the question for the podcast goes back to what my discussion with Dennis was the opportunity from a data analysis point of view that the Facebook business manager and the behind the scenes of Facebook offers. So my question to you is, have you set up custom audiences yet? Have you loaded in some data and done some analysis? So that's the challenge. Please send me a tweet at Sean Callanan or send Dennis a tweet at DennisU. We'd love to hear more teams setting up the custom audiences, set up those audiences of opportunity as we discussed, because that's the place that can really set the spark. And then you can do some testing at a small budget just to see what kind of reaction you get from your fans, and not only reaction, but also potentially some sales and some revenue based on your advertising spend, which is super important. New section for the podcast. I don't do this very often, but a quick book review. The book is No Grey Areas by Joseph Gagliano. I believe I'm saying that right. It's the inside story of the largest point shaving scandal in the history of the NCAA. Arizona State University point shaving scandal back in the 90s. For those of you in the US, you would know, you would have definitely heard of that scandal. For those of you who are in Australia, you might also be familiar with the scandal, or at least some of the names involved in the scandal. One of the players involved in the scandal and the players on the Arizona State University team was Isaac Burton. And it was quite funny when I got approached to review this book. I already knew the story primarily through Isaac Burton. He ended up playing for the Sydney Kings in the National Basketball League over here in Australia. And at the time, I was a tried and true supporter of the Melbourne Tigers. And we went to a Melbourne Tigers Sydney Kings game when all the court case that's outlined in Joe's book was happening, and all the reports, and so we'd found out that Isaac Burton had been involved in the point shaving scandal, and he accepted some house arrest time and was found guilty, as all the players were in the end. And it's a fascinating read. It's a little bit like a sports version of Catch Me If You Can, the Leo DiCaprio movie. But my personal tie to the story and Isaac Burton was we were there doing our best to put off the opposition and support the Melbourne Tigers at the time, and it happened to be rent day for one of my mates, Marcus Heasley, who was also sitting with us. And as Isaac Burton, every time he got the ball, we were always yelling at him, asking about point shaving, asking him if he would take some money, all in jest, to shave some points. I actually had a T-shirt that said, "Hey Isaac, do you take Visa?" And since Marcus had to pay his rent later in the day, and we were university students at the time, so we weren't exactly flush with cash, he actually had, I think it was about $1,500 in his pocket, all in 50s. In Australia, they're known as pineapples, and so he was effectively waving a big wad of cash to Isaac Burton, and Isaac knew that it was we were just poking a bit of fun. He was happy to talk back to us and point at us and hit some big shots, and it definitely fired him up. It was good to know the Tigers actually won the game. So it was a good bit of banter. That was my background to knowing about this Arizona State University point shaving scandal. So the book itself goes into that, how Joe became involved in that, became the person behind the scenes, driving all the money and putting all the bets on. And so it's a bit of his life story and a few mistakes, and how he kept playing in the grey areas. So if you're interested in that side of the business, or at least a really good tale of making bad choices, it's a good read. I read it while I was away recently. So give it a look. It's No Grey Areas by Joseph Gagliano. I hope I'm saying that name correct. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's available in all good bookstores and the like. And so I got triggered. The doing the book review sort of triggered me with a bit of an idea to do. I'm going to try to do a book review every episode, either ones that I'm currently reading or have read. So that's the first one. And since I'm doing a book review on a podcast, I thought it would also be a good idea to point people to a podcast and do a podcast review. I'm one. As a podcast producer, I'm also an avid podcast listener. So one of the problems that podcasting has is discovery and sharing of podcasts. I know I always ask people to please send a tweet or tell people you're listening, and it's not a natural thing. If you're currently running, having a run and listening to a podcast, you're not going to pull out your phone and tweet. If you're in the gym sweating away, lifting weights, again, you're not going to tweet. Or if you're driving in your car and you listen to a podcast, you're not going to post and tweet. So I do appreciate the people that do send out a tweet, tag at Sports Geek, and say, hey, I'm listening to the Sports Geek podcast. I really do appreciate it, but it's something that is not natural. So I thought I should follow my own advice and share with you, my listeners, some other podcast ideas, because I'm always listening. I'm always asking people when they say they're a podcast listener, what other podcasts do you listen to? So I think it's very much a case of, I use the hashtag widen your ears. It's always good to get reviews and opinions from other people. So I'm going to add a section in. Again, I'm going to try to say every single podcast, just to review a podcast or a podcast episode that I think you should give a listen to. So the first one I'm going to do is called By Association. It's a local podcast produced by James Parkinson here in Australia, and it's a podcast based around short stories around football, the world game, soccer as it might be known in different parts of the world. And what James does is sort of takes a real storytelling approach to tell stories from a fan perspective and from their point of view. So you don't have to be a football fan or amazing or a real big soccer fan to appreciate it, because it's really good in the storytelling side. So I listened to episode 1, Highbury 2006, where James goes into the final games of Arsenal at Highbury, and the story around someone trying to go to the game and get the tickets and the atmosphere around it. So again, congrats, James, on the new podcast. It's 3 episodes in. You can find it at byassociation.audio on the internet, or you can simply look up By Association on iTunes. I'll put the links again in the show notes. And again, if you've got a podcast that you think that you want me to review, or if I haven't listened to, hey, please send me a tweet, tell me about it. I've got a stack of podcasts sitting in Pocket Cast that I churn through as I'm walking to work, while I'm travelling, at different parts of the day where I try to find some time to listen to podcasts. I'm always trying to make sure that there is some time assigned to new podcasts to test out new formats and just hear what different people are doing in the podcasting space. So please either send me a tweet or send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com, to let me know what you're listening to, because again, I'm speaking to podcast listeners, so I know you listen to podcasts. I'd love to know what other podcasts you listen to. I'm happy to promote the ones that I think fit for this group, or just ones that are really good listens. So that's it for this episode 114. You'll be able to find the show notes for this episode at sportsgeekhq.com/114. I'd love you to send in, like I said, reviews. If you can leave them on iTunes, that would be terrific. Sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes is where you can find it. Other than that, until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.
Like the Sports Geek Podcast? Find us on Facebook.com/SportsGeek. Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at SportsGeekHQ.com/clients. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to SportsGeekHQ.com/iTunes. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.